Welcome back to the Teach for the Heart podcast, where we tackle teaching challenges from a biblical perspective. Why are we here? Because we don't believe that our spiritual walk and teaching profession should exist in two separate domains. Rather, the hope we have in Christ should change how we approach everything, not just at home, but at school as well. So join us as we explore both the spiritual and practical sides of key teaching challenges, integrating them together so we can succeed at teaching, glorify God, and make a lasting difference in our students' hearts and lives. This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. I'm so excited to be here today with Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook. Matt, thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Thanks for inviting me.
We're so excited to talk today a little bit about technology in the classroom and how to make learning memorable with tech, but without being overwhelmed. And I know that some people, when we bring up tech, they get so excited, but other teachers bring up tech and they almost like shrink back, like, no, I don't want to. It can feel really overwhelming or just like, oh, it's one more thing to figure out. So before we dive into, some of our favorite tools, can you start by, I would like to know, what encouragement would you give to a teacher who's kind of nervous about technology or kind of hesitant to try some things out?
Yeah, honestly, I would say that if they're nervous or hesitant or, have reservations or something, this might surprise you, but I honestly think that's a good thing because it means to me that in their heart, that teacher is thinking about their students and thinking about themselves and wanting to get things right. And when you introduce technology, sometimes, we know there's a little bit of the unknown. Sometimes, especially if it's newer technology, there's a little bit of a learning curve and we're not totally sure. And, if you go back to the tried and true stuff of, like your paper and pencils and your whiteboard in the front of the classroom, and even like real super, super simple tech, like showing a video on a screen or something, like we kind of know where that's going to go and how that's going to be and everything. So, as teachers, we kind of know what our students need and what's good and everything. And so, just there, I think the fact that if teachers have those early reservations, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. But I think we also know that because we have these sort of transformational devices in our classrooms, we're able to do a lot more than we've ever been able to do before. Before we had one-to-one devices in so many schools, a lot of it was we're going to do things with paper and pencil and textbooks and worksheets and everything. And of course, that can get to be a drag if we don't know how to do it very well, if we don't have a really good plan. But now we have all of these opportunities, I think, to do a couple of things. And these are the reasons that I'm so enthusiastic about using technology. One is that it can, of course, save us a ton of time. There are all sorts of resources available out online that you can go check out. Where you don't have to recreate everything from scratch. Number two is that it can engage students. It can really draw them in, hook them into learning in a whole different way. And I think another reason, number three, is that it does sort of prepare them for the future. Technology is going to continue to increase, continue to evolve. And if they get some of those repetitions and some of that practice in school, especially to help them to learn that those devices aren't just for games on their phone. It's not just, I hear teachers sometimes are like, oh, those kids and those Chromebooks, all they ever do is play games. And that always makes me want to say, that is our opportunity to help kids to learn how this can be a productive academic device. We can help them to see how this can be a transformational way for them to do work as students, but then in the future. So I think there's all sorts of benefits.
No, that's really helpful to hear. So what I'm hearing is that if you have some reservations, that they might be coming from a good place. And so don't need to feel bad for having those reservations, but at the same time should maybe become a little bit more open to all that technology can do and all the benefits to it as well. So what advice then would you have if teachers are kind of trying to decide, like, oh my goodness, like, where do I start? There's so many different things out there. So any advice on like how to decide what might be good for them?
Yeah. There's lots of different directions where we could go with this. I know for me, one place that I almost always look for some new technology or some old technology. Yeah, let me just pause on that for a second and say that when we're talking technology, we don't have to come up with the, cutting edge, most recent, newest, app or site or anything. Sometimes a good Google Doc will get the job done. Sometimes a good Kahoot game will get the job done. Quizlet flashcards, I still use those in class all the time. So I don't think you have to have all of the newest and best stuff. Well, we like the best, but you don't have to have the newest anyway. Sometimes some of that tried and true stuff is still really, really good. But as far as trying to decide what to use and when to use it and everything, I know for me, I kind of look at some of the non-tech things that I do in class, and I consider that my baseline. Like right now, I'm teaching high school Spanish. I have a whole load of high school Spanish classes that I teach, and there are actually a lot of things that I do that don't use technology. We get repetitions with our new vocabulary words sometimes with those little lap whiteboards, those little bitty whiteboards that you can use with dry erase markers. I use those things all the time. There are still some things where I teach from the front of the classroom. There's some storytelling stuff that we do, and with all of that, I'm really happy with the way that goes. But there are other parts of my class where I know that I could get some more engagement. Like instead of doing traditional repetitious worksheets, I think, man, is there a better way to get some of those repetitions in? And I think that's a good place that's maybe a good introductory place to explore integrating some technology, is to think, where are some of the places where you're just not getting what you want out of your class, and then if you can use some technology to kind of like level up that engagement. Say for instance, for me, I know if I want those students to get those repetitions, but I don't want to just hand them a worksheet. One thing that I've been doing recently is I've been using Pear Deck. And so Pear Deck is this great tool that works with Google Slides and PowerPoint to turn your slides into like interactive questions that your students can answer in the moment. So I've been using that a lot to get them some repetitions. And I've even been jumping off to some AI tools to add things to those slides. I knew that if we were going to talk about technology, I wasn't going to be able to hold off on the AI talk for very long. But I'm a big fan of using AI image generators to create images for me that students can talk about and write about in Spanish. So I'll go off, I'll give you an example. Right now in some of my classes, some of them are studying animal vocabulary and sports vocabulary. So what do? I go to an image generator and I create images of animals playing sports. And so now I have something that's very rich in vocabulary, that's engaging and fun. I throw those onto the slides, and then I just ask my students a million questions about them. I could never do that without the technology. I mean, I doodle things on my whiteboard sometimes. I feel like I'm a pretty decent doodler, but the things that I can put up on that screen are just, that's a level of engagement and interest that I couldn't get otherwise. So I think that's definitely one place, if you're thinking about maybe doing some technology integration, one of my favorite places to start is like, where am I not getting what I want? And I mean, I even have things in my own class where I go, it really can't get much worse than this. So, if you feel like it can't get worse than this, then maybe that's a good place to try something, and maybe it can improve it by leaps and bounds.
Yes. Okay. That's really, really helpful though. And I think that's a super helpful way of thinking about it, right? Because you were saying before, some of the fear is, well, this is working well. I don't want to mess it up. So those aren't the places to start looking and identifying, well, what are things that aren't working well? Kids are bored, or where I'm not satisfied with it, or it's taking forever, and looking for a solution there. That makes so much sense.
And you're exactly right. And I think there's also sometimes a misconception that it has to be all or nothing. Like all of a sudden I become, oh my goodness, I hear this word all the time, and I have strong feelings about this. They're like, all of a sudden I'm going to become techie. Oh, that word techie. That's almost like saying I have to be a super computer nerd before I'm going to use any technology in the class. That's not necessarily the case. Like, all you've got to do is just kind of look at it and go, where's one place that I can insert it in where it'll make things a little bit better? You don't have to become a technology all the time person. Sometimes it can just be that one little adjustment to one lesson or to one part of your class.
I love that. Yeah. Vicki Davis talks about that too. She calls it turtling.
I've heard her say that
thing
before.
At a time.
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. Really is.
This episode is brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation. Herzog believes that teachers are the heartbeat of schools and role models to future leaders. And in June, they're going to be hosting Making a Leap, a teacher symposium at Wheaton College, Illinois. They'll be exploring questions, concerns, and myths around Christian education. They'll be looking into things like reclaiming faith and freedom in the classroom, how to launch your own Christian school, and so much more. So if you're thinking about making the leap into Christian education, check out this 2-day event. You can get all the details. We'll link to them at teachfortheheart.com/leap. And now back to the show. You've already started to share a few of your favorite kind of tech things already. What are some other, though, if teachers are saying, okay, this sounds interesting, what are some of the tools that you might recommend that they try out?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and a lot of these really are pretty simple to start integrating, and there's a pretty low barrier of entry. So, I did mention Pear Deck. Now, some school districts have Pear Deck's competitor. They have Nearpod, and so if they have a subscription to Nearpod, both of those will do a lot of the same stuff. It's kind of like it takes your presentation slides and it turns them interactive. And I know one reason that I like this as sort of a good barrier or a low barrier of entry is because it's something that teachers are generally familiar with anyway. Presentation slides, even down into elementary school, we still end up using that to some extent. So that's definitely one of my favorites. I think that a lot of those sort of like review game apps, there's a ton of them. In fact, I like to call it the big five. There's like 5 of them that I always seem to go back to. So I'm going to give you the list here real quick. When it comes to those sort of like gamified game show style review apps, you've got Kahoot, Quizzes, Quizlet Live, Gimkit, and Blookit. And if you're a classroom teacher, you probably have recognized at least 1 or maybe 2 or more of those. But those are the 5, Kahoot, Quizzes, Quizlet Live, Gimkit, Blookit. And the reason I like those is that it does give students some repetitions with content that they need to remember. And honestly, the brain science still tells us that if we do recall, straight out of our brains, whether it's multiple choice or if it's like flashcard based or whatever, that still works for forming long-term memory. So if part of our goal is to form long-term memory, then that's definitely a good thing. And then, I'm still a big fan of using flashcards, like Quizlet flashcards. I think that's definitely a really good place to go. Another tool that is a little bit newer that is really interesting to me, and this one actually uses some AI to create the content, and it's called Curipod. So if you've not heard of Curipod, it's just CURIPOD.com, Curipod.com. And it feels a little bit like a slide presentation tool as well, where you can create slides. But Curipod uses AI to create the slides for you. And then there's all of these different really cool interactive type versions of those slides. So you can have students type things for you. There's one that I really like where it will take student writing, like the student can type something into the text box, and then it will use AI to generate feedback directly to the students immediately. That timely feedback. That's something that we've always heard that's powerful when it comes to feedback. So I don't know. I could go on and on and on with this. I mean, my list of tech tools that I love is super long. Of course, we're a Google school here, so I use lots of the Google tools, Google Docs, Google Slides, and everything. And we're also a Canva school. All of my students have Canva accounts, and I'm a big fan of Canva also. So, like I said, I could go on and on, but I'll stop there.
Well, this is really great. And so those of you listening to, if you're like, this is great, but I can't remember everything, or you're driving, you can't jot it down, we're going to list all of these out in the show notes for this episode at teachfortheheart.com/309. So if you go over there, -309, you can see all the resources that Matt is mentioning. Yes. All right. We have a little bit of time. So do you want to just take a moment and just share for people? I think most people are familiar with Canva, but could you share just a little bit of like, what are some of the things that you or your class do with that? I'd be curious.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So So Canva, of course, if you're not like super familiar, you can do all sorts of graphic design on it. You can do slides, you can do videos. Now they have the ability to do documents. So there's a ton of things that you can make on Canva. Sometimes I have my students create things in the slides and in the designs inside of Canva. So I mean, that's sort of like, it's kind of like what you do with PowerPoint or Google Slides, but I really like some of the design features that are built into it. A lot, more and more of my high school students that are using Canva are using it for that. But then there's one other thing that I really do like is that inside of Canva, it has this thing called Magic Media that lets you create some of those AI generated images. Now, not every school has that turned on, but my school district does. And so, to do storytelling in Spanish, sometimes I'll have students generate those images and throw them into the slides. Now, there is one fun little thing that we will do with that, because if you've ever had AI generated images before, you know that sometimes it does weird things. Like, it'll, instead of having 5 fingers, you'll have 4. Or one time we had a student make a cow and the cow had like 6 legs to it or something. So I do a very regularly, I have students identify the AI weirdness, in the images, which I think is a good sort of media literacy practice, but it also helps them to, keep an eye out for what's real and what's fake and everything. So it feels kind of like it's that little, digital literacy mini lesson inside of the bigger lesson. But Canva has tons of pre-made templates that you can pull in and assign to your students. Just the sky's the limit with it. I really like it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So many different things to try out. What would you be your encouragement to a teacher that's maybe, just kind of learning technology, or maybe they do things, but they're just kind of overwhelmed. They're like, okay, wow, there's a lot out there. You threw ideas. Maybe I've heard of people recommending you should check out this, you should check out that, check out the other. You already talked about thinking, what do you need? But do you have any other advice for them that might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed?
Yeah, because I've felt that before too, and I actually still do. I heard somebody define overwhelm once as it's not the problem of having too many options. It's not knowing where to start. And I think that's a big part of it, is not knowing where to start. So really, just finding some place to start and starting small. I think it's really easy for us to play the comparison game and to look at the teacher across the hall, or the teacher in another school, or the teacher we see on social media, and they go, oh, they're doing all of these great, big, impressive things, and I don't even know how to do that. Like, I don't even, if I don't know how to do that, maybe I just don't even start. Well, they started small too. And so small steps can give you that comfort level, and then you can sort of build on them. You don't have to be at a master level of something right away. So my encouragement is find a good place to start, and then take that first small step, just something really little, and then reflect on it. Look at it and go, did I like that? If I improve upon it, will it get better, and it will be something that I want to do? How did my students react to it? So I think any of that stuff, just like those little bitty things, I think can lead to bigger things down the road.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just get started. And I would imagine too, don't stress too much about what thing you pick first, right? Mm-hmm. Just pick one that looks interesting and try it out. It's not like you're committing to it for life. So
yeah, and you don't have to get it right the first time, I mean, there's been a number of apps where I've tried them in class, and I've just decided, nope, this isn't for me. And that's fine. And that's just life, right? Like you decide it's not for you, and you move on to the next thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Do you have any kind of final advice for teachers before we wrap up?
Yeah. One of the big lessons that I wish someone would have told me when I was like a baby teacher is that, even if you have curriculum, even if you have textbooks and everything, there's no one set way that you have to do things. I wrote a book and have a blog called Ditch That Textbook, because I started to learn as a Spanish teacher that, teaching straight out of the textbook wasn't the best thing for my students and wasn't for me, even though there were lots and lots of teachers that did it. And I was still able to follow my curriculum and, keep up with the scope and sequence and the pacing and everything just by doing things a little bit differently. So, if something isn't for you, then find a better way for you and your students.
Thank you so much. And as we conclude, you already shared a little bit, but where can teachers best connect with you? We know ditchthattextbook.com. Any other places would be good to connect at?
Yeah, that's probably the best one. If they go to ditchthattextbook.com, especially if they sign up for my email newsletter, there's a whole bunch of free ebooks and great resources. And then, I share that email newsletter a couple of times every week. And then I'm also not popular. I'm real active. That's the word I was looking for on Twitter/X. You can find me at jmattmiller.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you also for those of you that are Teach for the Heart Plus members. There is a special bonus coming out for you that Matt did on your gamified learning course. Do you want to take just a moment and share just a little bit about that? I assume if people aren't Teach for the Heart Plus members, they can find that on your website.
Yes, they can. That's under the courses in our website. And so this is a course called Game Show Classroom. It's all self-paced with some, some video modules and then some activities that you can do. And it's just got lots and lots of ways that you can gamify your class. So we talk about some of those game-based apps that you can use, but then also little lessons that you can learn from board games and video games to add new sort of engaging twists to the lessons that you're already teaching. There's just a ton of really good practical stuff in that.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Linda.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Matt Miller. If you are a Teach for the Heart Plus member, make sure you hop over to your membership and check out Ditch That Textbook's gamified learning course. And if you're not a Teach for the Heart Plus member and you want to find out more about that or join us, you can go to teachfortheheart.com/plus, teachfortheheart.com/plus to check that out. It includes all of our best professional development courses, as well as mentor support and the ability to ask mentor questions, bonus resources each month, and so much more. Once again, that is at teachfortheheart.com/plus. And then remember, all the links and all the resources that were mentioned today on the episode, you can find them at teachfortheheart.com/309. We also so much appreciate your reviews left on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever you listen to this podcast. That is such a great help for us as we seek to spread the word about the podcast, as well as when you mention an episode to your friends or you share one on social media. Well, this episode was brought to you in partnership with the Herzog Foundation, although all the views and opinions are our own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Herzog Foundation. Thank you so much for being here. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. In the meantime, teacher, remember, God is at work in you and through you, and He's using you to make a difference. Keep your eyes on Him and teach for the heart.